What's up, guys? We're back at you with another video that's going to hopefully help a lot of you that are considering going out of state for a hunt. This is something I've kind of been working on for a little bit, and tonight's just the night that we're going to start it. So I have my computer over here. I have some screenshots of some questions I've been asked along the way, and we're going to try and cover all that. It's going to be a multiple part video. This is going to be part one. We're going to cover how to choose a state, where you should go, what you should be thinking about, lodging, all of that. And then we're going to have a separate video for like the map scouting and such that I do here before I, put boots on the ground wherever it is I'm going. And then I may do a third video just with the questions that I accumulate from the first two, try and answer specific questions that you may have. So if you have those, go ahead and drop them into the comments, and that may make up a good third video, just answering these questions one-on-one. And I can do a little bit better job doing it that way rather than just going in and typing out a response like I try and typically do. So let's get into the video. Okay, probably the first thing that needs to be answered with all of this is, when should I go and where should I go? And in order to answer those questions, you're going to have to ask yourself a couple questions, to get to that answer. And the number one thing is, when are you going to go? Because that may dictate where you want to go. Most of the time for like a rut vacation, and I talked about a little bit about this on the Rocky Top Bow Hunting Facebook page back in the fall. But if you want to do a rut type hunt and you're only able to go for a week, the week I recommend, and probably the most popular week, if you could only do 7 days, would be like November 5th through the 12th. Now, that's when you're going to see the highest influx of pressure, but that's when I've seen the best action too. But, because of your work or your schedule, you might have to go early season. As far as where you should go, what I recommend is sitting down and making a list of 3 to 5 states that you want to hunt maybe this year and within the next 5 years. A good reason to do that is you have states like Iowa, for instance, in which you can't draw them every year. You need priority points. And that's something I may get into a little bit deeper, but that may be a 3 to 5 year out kind of deal to hunt like the southeast corner in Iowa. So that's the reason you want to make a list of short-term and also long-term goals with that, because you might have a state that you could hunt the next year or 2 or 3 and then have that like Iowa trip in the distance to look forward to. Okay, so after you make your list, there's going to be a couple other things you need to decide. Number one is how long you want to go. I know for me personally, when I first looked into doing this, a week seemed like a really long time to go hunt somewhere. Take it from me, it's not. 7 days is not that long, and it's really hard to get it done in 7 days or less. You can do it, people do it, but you're only looking at realistically being able to hunt 3 or 4 days out of that 7. So you better, be starting in a good area. You don't have a lot of time to figure things out. So take as much time as you possibly can. And there's going to be some ways that you can budget to allow yourself a little bit more time, and we'll cover that a little bit later as well. For the purpose of this video, we're going to assume public land, because if you have out-of-state private to hunt, you've probably got a lot of these questions answered, and most of us don't have that. So public land is, for the sake of this video, is kind of what we will assume. Okay, so when you make your list of states you want to hunt, what I do from that point is I research each state. I will go to that state's DNR website and just kind of get an idea of license costs and tags. Different states are structured differently. Some of them will hit you with your high cost on the license and the tag's reasonable. Most states, the license is pretty reasonable, but the tag is pretty expensive. So, take your list, write out the state you're looking for, go on the DNR website, get a rough idea of license costs, and once you get it whittled down to a few states, what I like to do is actually email the DNR directly. If you go to that state's website, there's usually a contact us tab, and you can send an email to somebody who is over the licenses and tell them, you know, who you are, that you're non-resident, when you're wanting to hunt, and you're wanting to hunt, you know, public land, national forest, whatever, and they can tell you a little bit more than what you can get out of just looking at the website, because that can be pretty overwhelming trying to decide what licenses and tags and such that you need to be legal. I've always just emailed the DNR directly, and they've always been super helpful. And I'll give you an example of something I thought I knew that I really didn't, that I learned by emailing the DNR. So we will take Illinois for instance. I'd always looked at Illinois as a straight over-the-counter state, because I don't know how many people that I've talked to that just buy their tags over the counter when they get up there. You can do that, but that is not 100% accurate. When I emailed the DNR in Illinois, they told me that they're actually a draw, and that was pretty shocking to me. I'd never heard that, but it's true. They hold a draw that you have to put in for June or July, and then leftovers after that draw go on sale like August, and you can buy those online. And then after that, you know, 1 month period there around August expires, then everything goes straight to over the counter until they're all sold. Now, in most cases, they're not all sold, but for me personally, that's not something I want to risk. I prefer to buy my licenses ahead of time, say July or August. Not only does that make me commit to going to that state, but it also helps kind of defer some of that cost. I can break up that cost, you know, over the course of 3 or 4 months rather than all the cost when I go. And that makes it a little easier for me financially. It makes it not seem as bad, even though, you know, it's all the same at the end of the day. But we'll kind of get into budgeting here in just a second. I'll just go ahead and cover the budgeting part now, because that'll lead us into camping or lodging as well. But budget-wise, this is something I've gotten asked, is real-world cost of these trips. And it's actually a lot more affordable than what you think. It seems overwhelming and extremely expensive, but it's really not. This past year, I kind of went all out, took almost 3 weeks off from work. It was like 18 days. And I hunted 2 different states in Illinois and Ohio. And tax, tag, title, food, the whole nine. I think I spent $1,500, and that's a conservative number. It was probably less. But that was something I really wanted to figure out when I got back, and that was the best number I could come up with. And of that, you're talking about $700 to $750 was just licenses and tags, so half of that. So I think for me, the key to doing it on a tight budget is camping rather than staying in a cabin or a hotel. Now, if you get several of you, several people together to go, that it helps bust up that cost, and I've done that too. But that more people also brings in more issues. But for me personally, we'll just assume a 1 or a 2 man kind of deal. Just to give you an idea on cost, camping generally, I prefer tent camping at this point. The reason for that is, like I said, you can save some money. Now, I want to camp somewhere that I have electrical hookup, so I can charge my camera batteries, I can run a heater at night, I can do a lot. When it gets cold, I can run a small ceramic heater about yay big, and it keeps me plenty warm. Between that and a 20-degree sleeping bag, you have no issues. Now, when you're camping, you can expect most campgrounds to pay $15 to $20 per night with electrical hookup. You can shave off of that some if you just choose to primitive camp, but me, with filming and stuff, I really need that electrical hookup. A lot of your national forests, you can actually primitive camp for free, so you could even go more bare bones and cheaper if you wanted to. And that was something that I might do if it was a little bit earlier in the year, or if I didn't have the camera batteries to charge. I could actually do it off my truck, but it would be a little harder to do. So I just pay that cost, $15, $20 a night. You can actually find it, I found it as cheap as $10 a night with electrical hookup, but $20 on the high end, $10 on the cheap end. Now, You're probably wondering where or how to find those places or campsites or whatever, but since you're hunting public land, a lot of times that'll be a national forest, some type of state park, so on, and those are also the places that generally have campgrounds. Now, you can also get on the DNR website and email them, or a lot of times they'll have a website or a link that you can follow to make reservations and stuff. Illinois does that. I think it's reserveamerica.com, and it lists all of their campgrounds. It makes it pretty easy. Now, another option with those campgrounds, a lot of times they have small cabins that you can rent. I would say average price on those would be around $50 a night from what we've found. Generally, there'll be a cheaper weekly rate. We've gotten those for about $275 a week. So if you've got a couple guys, I wouldn't want to put more than 3 in one of those small cabins, but you can break up that cost pretty good. Now, as far as hotels, you're all pretty familiar with hotels. You would think going to these little hole-in-the-wall places they would be cheap, but they're generally not. You know, around hunting seasons when they make their bulk of their money. So be surprised if you find anything cheaper than $70 or $80 a night, in my experience. I have stayed in hotels on short-term trips, like when I went back up to Ohio for 2 or 3 days there, 1st of December. I stayed in a hotel for 2 nights, just because I didn't want to go through lugging my tent up there and putting it up just for 2 nights. So there are times that that's fitting, but I would recommend camping or trying to find that cabin. A simple Google search will tell you a lot on that, and contacting the DNR will also tell you a lot on that. That's where you're going to save the most of your money. Say you have $15 a night in a campground, and you're going to stay, 10 days. You're only spending $150 for lodging. That's 2 nights in a hotel that you're getting 10 days out of. 2 nights in a hotel without tax. So you can get an idea there just how much money you can save by camping. Now, you're probably thinking, oh God, it'd be cold, it's not that comfortable. Listen, when you're on these hunting trips, you're gone literally all day. And when you get back at night, I could sleep in the middle of the asphalt. I mean, you're so tired and exhausted. It is so... A tent is the last thing on my mind. And when it comes to foul weather and rain, the tip for that is take a tarp, a big tarp, stretch it over your tent stake on all sides. You'll never get water inside of the tent. That's a trick I learned from a buddy of mine. It has been through 30, 40 mile an hour winds. It works. Been through many rainstorms. You never get water inside. So don't look at this like you're going on family vacation with the kids. It's a hunting trip first and foremost, and you're spending very little time at camp. Most of the time in Illinois, I was coming back, fixing food. As soon as I ate, I was out. So you can camp pretty easy, and it's actually pretty fun. It's my preferred way to go about it now. Okay, so some of your popular states, if you're wondering, where you should go or looking for advice, Iowa's probably your #1 state, and there's a reason for that. It's probably the most well-managed state that there is. They regulate how many out-of-state hunters you can have. They regulate number of tags. They break it up into different zones. So that's probably the most popular, but that's also, probably because you can only hunt it every so many years. It's not an every year kind of place. Kansas is another popular one. I think parts of Kansas you can hunt every year. Some of it you might not be able to. It's actually a draw. So that's something to look into. I haven't looked into Kansas that much. Illinois, you can pretty much hunt it every year. Trying to think. Iowa and Kansas are in the upper $500 ranges on tags and licenses. Illinois, high 400s. I think Missouri's mid 200s, 250, 260. Ohio's up to 250, 260. That's on the low end. But you're talking about a once-a-year trip. You can budget and plan accordingly for that. I don't think there's enough difference in any of the states to deter me from going if I want to go, because like I said, it's a once-a-year trip. Ohio is probably one of the more popular ones for us East Coast guys, because it's probably the first real big buck state heading west from the East Coast. So it does get a lot of us East Coast guys there. The southeast part of Ohio is a very good place to go. It's very mountainous, lots of timber, really big bucks, but lower deer density than what I've experienced in, say, Illinois or when you go west. But it's a really good place to start, because you've got some of the bigger national forests down there that offer cabins and lodging. It's pretty easy to find, pretty easy to do. What I would recommend is whittling that list that I told you to make down to about 3 states, and kind of what you can do with that is have one state that you're going to hunt maybe this year and next year, and then maybe have another state that you may hunt the 2 after that, and then have a long-term goal like Iowa that you can be accruing your priority points for. And kind of when you start doing this DIY out-of-state hunting, you kind of have to have one eye, you know, on next year and one eye towards the future. And I wish somebody would have really got that into my head a few years ago. You know, I'm still fairly young. I'm 28, but I wish I would have started putting in for some of these priority points and such when I was, you know, 18, 20. But at that time, you know, hunting out of state seemed like such a long ways off, and it really wasn't. So even if you don't think you'll be able to go to a state for a long time, start getting those priority points. Like Iowa's $75 a year. I've got 2 of them right now. I'll have 3 after this spring. But go ahead and start doing that. You'll be glad you did, because by the time you're actually ready to hunt it, if you wait till you're ready, you know, you're going to have another 3 to 5 year wait after that before you can even go hunt it. So start now. That way when you're ready to go, you'll actually be able to go. That's some of the best advice I could give anybody. So now you've got your list of states that you're pretty interested in. You're willing to camp, say, or stay in a cabin. You're not sure yet. So you're probably wondering, how do you decide what part of the state to go to? And that's an open-ended question, because most of these states that we've mentioned, whether it be Iowa, Kansas, Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, Wisconsin, you know, Kentucky, whether it be any of those, you've got good hunting in multiple parts of the state. So I can only speak to how I choose. I can't speak to how anybody else chooses. There's probably no wrong answer when it comes to this. You know, there's not that one spot that you go that's just covered up with deer. Every spot's going to be similar in a lot of ways and different in some ways. It's going to be kind of based on what kind of habitat and terrain that you personally want to hunt. Now, living in Northeast Tennessee, you know, a lot of the public land and the way I grew up hunting was big timber mountains. That's a big reason why I'm starting to shy away from Ohio as much, because it's literally just hunting like home with a little bit bigger deer opportunities. So I like diversity. I like doing new things. I like the adventure. So that's why you're seeing me branch out more. So for me personally, and how I choose a rough area of where to go, I'll tell you, first and foremost, I could not do it without that onX Hunt app. It's not the cheapest thing in the world to pay that yearly subscription or monthly subscription. You can actually do it monthly and just keep it when you need it. But I could not do any of this without onX. Not a sponsor, nothing. But like, for instance, in Illinois, and I've ran into this in Ohio too, is a lot of the public land's not marked. I would say in Illinois, 10% of the public land that I walked on actually had signs marking it as public land. If you didn't have the app, you probably wouldn't know. And it gives you such a big advantage. And not even on the aspect of finding land. I use it, I don't know how many times I go into an area I've never been into before with my stand on my back. I go in the daylight, hunt till dark, and then I have to get out. I've only walked in there one time. I use that onX so much to get me back to the truck. A lot of times I'll have the track feature on when I go in, so that'll give me a line coming out, and I use it basically like a compass and a GPS. Not to mention I mark sign, I mark my tree stands or places. Every time I set up, I mark that on there. That way if I go back into an area and I need to shift a little bit, I know exactly where I was at. It is my number one tool and number one thing that I use on my hunts out of state. I almost wouldn't even go if I didn't have that or something similar. There's some other apps out there that do similar things now. I don't have as much experience with it. I doubt I'll ever change from onX because it's so easy to use. It offers everything that I need. If you've never had it before, they offer a 7-day free trial where you get all of the features. It'll show you private lands, private landowners, public lands. It'll even show you campgrounds, which is super, super useful for what we're just talking about now, about going on an out-of-state hunt and wondering, where am I going to stay? So it is so, so valuable. So that is a big part of what I do and how I do it. Now, when I'm picking where I want to go, that I use that a lot. Now, I will start at a 10,000 foot view of whatever state I'm wanting to hunt, and I'll just kind of look at what areas have the highest concentration of public land. So if we take Ohio for instance, and you look at that state, you'll notice down in that southeast corner there's a lot of public land. Now, that's twofold. You're going to get more people, but you've got more land to work with, so it's kind of give and take. So personally, I want to go to an area that I have multiple pieces of public land within, say, an hour's drive that I can go to. The worst thing, in my opinion, that you can do on any out-of-state hunt is pigeonhole yourself to one area. I've done it myself, and I've seen other people do it all the time. They go to a state, they scout an area, find good sign, and they set up camp there. Well, little do they know, there's going to be an influx of pressure, maybe some people move in on them, and then they're like, well, that's my spot, what do I do now? That's why, if you really pay attention to my Illinois videos from earlier this year, you'll see me bouncing around a lot the first several days, just checking out a bunch of different areas. Even when I'm on deer and on deer sign in some of the areas that I hunt, I don't really want to dig into an area until I have multiple options. So that's why when I'm looking at that 10,000 foot view of a state, I want to pick the areas, and there may be 3, 4, 5 of them, you know, across the state. There may only be 1 or 2 where I've got multiple public lands within a reasonable drive, and that's where I start. And if there's multiple ones, then I can start being picky. I like to pick the lands that are furthest from big cities. You know, that's high population. You've got people that live in those cities that also hunt, and they're driving out of the city, you know, when they want to go hunt, so they're going to hit the closest place. So that I like to avoid that if I can be picky. Now, if I can also be picky, I want to pick, me personally, this is just what I like. You know, some people like big timber, some people like, you know, different things. But for me, I want to see habitat diversity. I don't want to see all timber. I don't want to see all swamp. I don't want to see all marsh. I don't want to see all grassland. You know, I want broken habitat diversity. That's what I like seeing on a piece of public land. May be different for everybody, but those habitat changes and habitat breaks are very, very important to me, because that's where I've found deer the most. I've probably just found deer there the most. I can just leave it at that. They're a little easier to get on. They're a little easier to find. The hardest hunting, in my opinion, and I feel so strongly about it, is big timber hunting. Big woods, big timber, mountain hunting. There's nothing tougher when it comes to getting on and killing deer. You're going to fight your wind the whole time. It is by far the hardest. Now, as a caveat with that too, is it can be a little bit easier because you can just hunt based off the terrain. That's where your saddles and your pinch points and hunting that top third of ridges and stuff make it a lot easier. But we won't get too sidetracked on that. So you've picked a general area at this point that you want to go. Now, like I said, Onyx is probably my number one most useful thing. Number two for me is doing a spring shed hunting and scouting trip. It's one of those things that I wouldn't give up my hunting time to do it, but I like taking a long weekend. Like for me personally, I get laid off from my job for 5 days every year in April, and like that's when I went to Illinois last year. But sometime, and that's getting a little late, but I'm just using the time that I have. But sometime from February to April, it's good to take, like say a long weekend, take 3 or 4 days, more if you can, but or if less if that's all you got, and spend a couple days there. But go to that area that you have picked and just burn through as much of it as possible. I never pick a place to hunt in the spring, like specifically, because you're looking at a full year's worth of sign. You don't know if it was September or October, November, or December when that sign was made. You just know that the deer were in there at some point. So when I'm scouting in the spring, I'm looking for sheds as much as I am looking for sign. But I'm pretty much just ruling out areas and marking areas that are maybes, potential areas. And those are the areas that I go back to in the fall. And you can pretty much tell pretty quick if that sign's opened up, if it's hot right now, or maybe it was, you know, right out of velvet. You know, you see a lot of sign from September that cools off and the deer aren't there in October, November. A lot of that you see that a lot, especially the more you start scouting in the spring. So you go, that spring trip is super valuable to me. And if nothing else, you just get familiar with the area. And it also gives you an idea roughly of the area that you'll be hunting, and you can also get an idea of where the campgrounds are. And after that spring trip, that really gives you a lot of information to work with on picking somewhere to stay, you know, get an idea of where you may be hunting. You can finalize a lot of your plans and your details if you do that spring trip. Now, I've got buddies, I talked to a guy from like New Jersey, New York, up that way, that travels to Illinois every year, and he's been super duper successful. They kill deer every year in Illinois, and they can't do that spring trip, and a lot of guys might not be able to. So in that case, you're gonna have to wing it a little bit, and that's where I say picking that area that has a bunch of public land to choose from is really important. That way you have options. Now, if you can't go scout in the spring, I would try and extend that fall hunting trip as long as possible. For me, I think 2 weeks is a good amount. A week is really cutting it short, but if that's all you got, just go. You know, just do one of these hunts. I would have argued with you up and down that I could not afford to take off 1 week to hunt, but after I did it, I have started to extend more and more time each year because I'm budgeting throughout the year and squirreling away money every chance I get because I love it so much. So you'll find a way to make it work, but you just need to get that little taste of it. Don't go expecting to kill a 150-inch deer the first year. It's rare. You just don't see it that much. You'll learn so much. I would say in the few years that I've been going out of state, I probably learned more than what I had my whole life here hunting in state. You just get so stuck in a rut and stuck in your ways of hunting the same properties all the time, and it's almost, you know, it's almost second nature. You know historically where deer are going to be or where you've killed them in the past, and you aren't as, you know, tuned in as you are when you go out of state. You know, when you go into an area for the first time, you are just hyper focused, reading every little scrap of sign that you can. I don't do that as much here, and that's probably why I love it so much, and you get quite a bit of adventure out of it. Okay guys, this is probably the part I've been looking forward to most, and I'm going to go through and answer some of your questions that you have put on my community post I made when I was talking about doing this video. So if you're not already a subscriber to Rocky Top Bow Hunting, just hit that subscribe button. Even if you haven't even made a YouTube account, do it, because I'll post some of these community posts on here and you guys can ask questions. And if you on this video, go in the comments. If you have some questions, ask them. I try and always respond, but I can cover stuff a little bit better on a video like this than I can typing it out. And I'm going to try and do a video at the end of this series and go through all the questions that I've got. But let's go through what we've got so far. The first one here is from Austin Lancaster. He says, I'd like to get some pointers on all of it in general. I'm from North Carolina and love to travel out of state just to have an opportunity to see a 150-inch deer. The thought of planning something like that, having never done it, is overwhelming, and I think any info you can give will be helpful for me. Man, that sounds like me to a T a few years ago. It is overwhelming if you don't know what to do, and you're never going to know exactly what to do. You just have to kind of do it. Just go for it. Decide you're going to do it. No one's going to be able to give you all the answers. So if I was going to put it in order of importance, contact the DNR for the state you want to go to and figure out what licenses you need to be legal. Once you're legal on licenses and tags, then the rest of it's pretty easy. Being in North Carolina, I don't know what part, but Ohio is probably going to be the best one to start out with. I would check that southeast part, but there's a lot of good hunting all the way around. As far as opportunity to see a 150-inch deer, don't go with that expectation, but it's a realistic, it's a realistic outcome. You know, you could see a 150-inch deer, but don't go expecting that, because it is hunting. It's hard to see a 150-inch deer, but there are deer there. I want to say in my 3 years going to Ohio, I've seen a 150-inch deer, or at least in the 140s, all 3 years, including I killed that one right there in Ohio in 2017, and he was over 150 inches. So just make sure you're legal on your tags. Contact the DNR directly, because it's kind of hard to make heads or tails sometimes of just looking on the website of what you need. Send them an email. I've never had a state not get back to me and not give me really good information. Honestly, you could pack up and just drive up there without having anywhere to stay, and you would be okay. You're going to be able to find something. It's really, really not that hard. That's another reason I like the tent camping, is it gives you flexibility. If you put up camp and you spend 2 or 3 days somewhere and you're just not happy with where you're at, shoot, you could pack up and go 2 hours away and go somewhere else. You're not married to that spot. Most of the campgrounds will let you pay by the day. So that's a big reason why I'm kind of venturing that direction, because it doesn't leave me tied down and committed to paying for something for a week or two. So hopefully that helps you, Austin. The next one is Fleming Farms. It says, how about information on where you stay while you're there? Not like exact places, but like cabin, hotel, campground. Also what you do for meals throughout the week. I do a lot of out-of-state hunting, and I run to a lot of hunters that do different things. Man, I've done all that. I've stayed in hotels, cabins, and campgrounds. At this point, I like the campground tent camping the most, especially if I'm doing it solo, which I've been doing a lot more solo trips. Cabins are good if you've got, because generally all the ones I've seen have been pretty small. If you've got 2 or 3 guys, cabin may be the best option. Just depends on the guys you're going with. If you're going to do a hunting trip like this, make sure you're going with guys that you can get along with, that want to hunt kind of similar to how you do. Me personally, there's a few guys that I'm good with going with, but I always want to have a second vehicle, because the more people you introduce into the equation, the more problems you're going to have. And I don't mean problems in a bad way. It's just more. It's just different. You're going to have to kind of cater to more people. Everybody's going to kind of have an opinion on that. But if you've got a couple good hunting buddies, go. Cabin might be your best option. Like I said, somewhere around $50 a night. With weekly rates generally available. Now, if your hunting buddies like camping too, you could do a campground and you could stay uber cheap. I mean, if there's 2 of you and you tent camped, you're talking about spending $5 to $10 a night a piece. You're just staying for next to nothing. As far as what I eat, when I'm in the tent, it varies. I do a lot of just cheap ramen noodles at night. I've done mountain house meals. I always have a loaf of bread and make sandwiches. You know, it's just typical camping foods. I take 2 coolers. I have one big cooler that I pack gear in on the way up there for bringing meat home. And then I also have another cooler that I use for drinks and food to actually keep cold. But on the food thing, you can get as extravagant as you want. The next one is Brandon Alexander. Says, sounds great. I'm really interested in your rough scouting, why you pick a particular area you hunt in before stepping foot in the state, and do you rough scout a plan B or even a plan C? Man, if I could, I have a plan E. I want at least a few different options. As far as how I scout, like map scout, we'll get into that in the next video, so stay tuned for that one. As far as picking a particular area, maybe to even begin map scouting, that's where I was talking about, you know, that 10,000 foot view and picking areas that offer me multiple hunting or public areas, you know, within an hour's drive or so. I don't want to be stuck with only one area. So stay tuned, Brandon. I'll be able to go over a little bit more on the map scouting in the next video. The next one is Jim Owens. Do you have a criteria or a checklist in picking out the property in the first place? I'm really looking forward to this. Jim, my biggest thing on a checklist is, like I said, I prefer diversity. I would prefer it to be as far away from big cities as possible. And other than that, I'm pretty open to hunting any type of terrain. The next one's largemouth bass, and that's B-A-S-T. A cost breakdown is always nice. I know it will vary for everyone. I think it would be cool to do a cost breakdown from the moment you leave the house until you return. Just a thought. Keep up the great work. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I hunted 2 states, 18 days, and spent about $1,500. Now, half of that was licenses and tags. Now, if you only go to, say, 10 days, you're going to have, say you go to Illinois, or say you go to Ohio for 10 days, you're going to have your $250, $260 license. It might actually be going up again. Then, say you have a $15 a night campground for 10 days, that's $150 there, so you're at $400, and that's all your major expenses. After that $400, all you've got to worry about is gas and food. I mean, that's pretty much it. Gas and food. Your tags and your lodging, that's your 2 biggest. So if you can camp rather than staying in a hotel or a cabin, that'll really cut down on that. Sean K. What's the #1 thing you look for in map scouting, or is there certain things in an area must have before you put boots on the ground? There's nothing that it has to have. Like I said, I prefer diversity. I also don't like, I didn't mention this earlier, I don't like seeing a lot of access. I don't want to see roads just going through the whole thing to where, you know, if you get out from the road and walk a mile, you're getting closer to another road, you know. I don't like seeing a lot of easy access if I can help it. For me personally, just because it's a little harder to get away from people, it seems, in those scenarios. Alright, the next one is Lee Landfear, and I hope I pronounced that right. Said, I would like to know how you handle the meat after harvest, especially if you plan on staying longer, heading to another state. Now, if you're staying longer in that spot, whether you have another tag or a buddy still hunting, you're pretty much, if you take it to a butcher, they'll keep it until you're ready to go, so it makes it pretty easy. Now, in my case, if I'm going to another state, like in Illinois, I actually gave most of that deer to my buddy that helped me up there a lot, let me borrow the kayak and such. He'd had a rough season, hadn't killed anything to that point, and it made it a little easier for me, and I'd already had a pretty good season, killed a buck in Tennessee. Now, my plan, if I hadn't have done that, was to get it quartered or take it to a butcher and have them cut it up there. Generally, when you're out of state, these butchers will take care of the non-residents. They'll get the meat taken care of really fast. So if they do that, That makes it a little easier if they get that meat good and frozen. You can go to your next state, and a lot of times if you can find a butcher in the area that you're going to, they will maybe charge you a little bit but allow you to put that meat in the freezer until you're ready to go home for good. So you just got to call around, find somebody willing to work with you. We've got a really good guy in Ohio that's helped me. So when I got to Ohio from Illinois this year, he let me put my cape in his freezer until it was time for me to go home. Most of these butchers are really nice guys. Maybe offer them a little bit of money. Usually they won't take it, but it's a good gesture. That's all I've got right now for questions. Go ahead and drop what you got now in the comments. I know I've said that a few times. If you're not already, please subscribe to the Rocky Top Bowhunting channel. It'll just notify you when new videos come up, and most importantly, if I make any type of community post where I'm asking questions or sharing maybe something behind the scenes, you'll be able to get that and comment on it. It'll pop up in your subscriptions tab of your YouTube app or on your YouTube page, homepage. So do that. Next video we're going to break into map scouting. It's impossible for me to cover everything, so if I miss something, please put it in the questions, or put it in the comments. Ask the question. I'll get to it later.